Hello, my name is Stan,
And my name is Mart-Jan.
and our presentation is about the Wild West. Today's Florida and Nevada have had a rough history over time. The Wild West. But what is the Wild West?
When we talk about the Wild West, people mostly think of the fight between cowboys and Indians, or about duels between cowboys.
They think of small towns designed for a couple of people, with a big pub in the middle of the town.
But was the Wild West really so wild?
History of the Wild West. The Wild West started due to a shift of borders. When the British first arrived in the new discovered continent of America, people started acting exactly like them. Their clothes were the same and their behavior as well. Here's where our border first comes into the picture. The Mississippi River. There was an east side and a west side of the river. The Wild West and the normal East. People in the West acted rough and were in spell of gold fever.
There were a lot of fights about the gold and land. The settlements gave priority to the land ownership for individual farmers, and as the population grew, they pushed westward for fresh farmland. Unlike Britain, where a small number of landlords owned most of the good land, ownership in America was cheap, easy and widespread. Land ownership brought a degree of independence as well as a vote for local and provincial offices.
The typical New England settlements were quite compact and small, under a square mile. Conflict with the Native Americans arose out of political issues, namely who would rule. Early frontier areas east of the Appalachian Mountains included the Connecticut River Valley and northern New England.
The gold fever. In 1848, the people discovered gold in California. The following year, almost all the people who were heading west were gold prospectors. Sometimes they were called the 49ers, because this was the year the gold rush started. The gold was washed out of the mountain rocks by the streams and it mixed with the gravel in the river. The way the gold prospectors got the gold was by panning. Some people got very rich by this gold hunting, but the most didn't. The blacksmiths and the shopkeepers actually made the most money in the gold rush by providing for the miners' needs.
The myths. Number 1. Most people think that the old westerns treat the Indians like garbage and that they were always fighting against each other and that thousands of people died from that.
In reality, conflicts between the Indians and the settlers hardly ever occurred. About 300 or 400 people died while having a skirmish. Even more settlers died from totem pole collapses. Actually, the Native Americans were very friendly and absolutely not violent at all.
Number 2. Everybody thinks that the Wild West was full of violent thieves who robbed the bank every week. And why not? There were no laws and there were no vaults in the banks, so criminals didn't care if they got caught or not. It was so easy, the bags with money were already in their hands, right?
The truth is, in 40 years there have only been 8 bank heists, and that across 15 states. But bank robbing wasn't so easy. The towns back in those days were much smaller, and the sheriff was a few doors next to the bank. And all the houses in the town were very close to each other, so it was difficult to get out safely and unseen.
Number 3.
When you think of cowboys, which things do you see?
American, guns, horses, lassos, a typical cowboy hat.
Right. What you now think is totally not true. The cowboys were actually Mexicans. And
Mexicans? Wow, okay, Mexicans, so the idea of cowboys being Americans is all hoax.
yeah, cowboys weren't protectors of the city, but they usually had a herd of cows and sometimes held rodeos. They lived mostly in the open plains. When the American settlers moved westwards to the country of the Mexican cowboys, the Mexicans learned the Americans all the tips and tricks to be a cowboy.
So, Americans own a big part of their history to the Mexicans? Don't let Trump hear this. Number 4. Everybody thinks that the cowboys had at least 2 guns in their pockets and they used it for duels, fights, defense, hunting and celebrating.
But actually, gun control laws were stricter than they are now, especially in the West. there was a short time that the West was actually wild, because of some several gunfights. But a few years later, cities started to prohibit weapons. But the guns then weren't even that dangerous. Basically, it was a marble launched by black powder, mostly used to keep the cows in the herd.
The Wild West facts. A boomtown was a town that quickly prospered, usually because of the discovery of nearby gold. The boomtowns often turned into ghost towns after the gold strike ended.
Dodge City was one of the wildest cities in the West.
The Texas Rangers were established in 1835 as a mounted fighting force to maintain law and order in the Wild West. They quelled the feuds and shootings, and the outlaws and rustlers who operated in the cattle business.
In 1892, the Dalton gang raided Coffeyville. Kansas and Gret and John Dalton were killed, and Emmett Dalton was sent to prison.
A newcomer in the Old West was called a tenderfoot or greenhorn. Other names for the cowboys included cowpunchers, cowpokes, buckaroos, and cowhands. Thanks for watching, everyone.
I hope you enjoyed it.